Hungarian Folk Tales. The Bear and the Cat. Many, many years ago, in a land far, far away, there lived a bear. And one day, the bear met a cat and said, "Let us work together, cat, and build a house." So the two of them worked together and they built a house in the forest. When the autumn came, the leaves began to fall, and the bear said, "The winter will soon be here. Let us work together, cat, and collect some food." So the two of them bought a bucket, went deep into the forest, and filled the bucket with wild honey. Then they got a second bucket and filled it with fat, and carried the buckets up to the attic. The winter that came was a very bleak one indeed, with plenty of wind, lots of snow, and very cold days. So the bear lay down to go to sleep, while the cat watched over the fire and sat comfy in the warmth. But then the cat slowly became hungry and wondered how it could get out of the house so it could climb up into the attic to eat from the buckets of honey and fat. "Where are you going, cat?" "You will never believe me, but a mouse just came past and invited me to a baptism." "The mouse has just had a baby and says it wants me to be the baby's godfather." "Very well, then you had better go," said the bear. So then the cat sneaked up to the attic and ate a quarter of the honey and a quarter of the fat and sneaked back down again. "Oh, you're home from the baptism. What's the little one's name?" "A quarter." "How about that? I've never heard of a name like that." Time went by and the cat got hungry again. "Hey, cat, where are you going?" "Well, you will never believe me, but another little mouse came by and invited me to another baptism." "Very well, then you had better go." "You're home again soon?" "That's right," said the cat. "And what's the little one's name?" "A half." After a few days, the cat got hungry again and quietly opened the door. "Where are you going, cat?" "You will never believe me, but I've been invited to another baptism. Another baby mouse was born, and I'm to be its godfather." "Very well, then you had better go." "So what's the little one's name?" "Nothing." "Oh my, that's the strangest name of all." When the spring came at last, the bear woke from its winter sleep, thin and hungry as it had not eaten since the autumn. "But everything is fine because we have plenty of honey and fat in the attic. Cat, please fetch some and we'll make delicious pancakes with honey." "Go up to the attic, cat, and fetch the 2 buckets down." "Oh, but I'm so dizzy." So very, very dizzy. And we all know that cats don't get dizzy, don't we? But the cat was pretending. "Very well, I'll go and get it myself," said the bear. So the bear went up to the attic and found both buckets empty. "I'm going to teach that bad cat a lesson. Cat, you ate everything up, and that is why you said a quarter, a half, and nothing." The cat denied the whole thing and said to the bear, Let's make a test. We'll both lie in the sun for a while, and whoever ate the honey and the fat will sweat it out, and then we'll know. So they lay down in the sun, and the cat ran up to the attic and scraped what was left of the fat and the honey from the buckets and smeared it on the bear's fur. Then the bear woke up and looked at its sticky fur and said, "Oh dear, I must have eaten it all. But when did I do it?" When the cat saw the bear, it couldn't stop laughing. And it laughed, and it laughed, and it laughed, and it ran off into the forest. And the poor foolish bear lived unhappily ever after. Hungarian Folk Tales. Dan the Dancer. The king mourned his beautiful wife for a year and a day. When his mourning was over, he had it announced all over the land that he would marry any maiden who could spin yarn of gold. One old woman heard this news and rushed home to her house to tell her ugly daughter. "Well, my dear, could you spin yarn of gold out of string?" Her daughter set about thinking and soon set her heart on becoming queen. Once, when her mother was away in the village, she shut all the doors, covered all the windows so as not to be seen by anybody, and began to spin yarn. She kept on at it for quite some time, but there was no way she could make yarn of gold out of old string. "Oh, I can't go on like this. If someone taught me how to spin yarn of gold, I'd give him my body and my soul, even if he was the devil himself." "Here I am, sweetheart. What do you wish?" The girl told him what, and asked him to teach her how to spin yarn of gold out of simple string. She said she'd give him anything he asked. "I'll teach you if you give me your body and your soul in a year from now." The girl agreed. "Sit here on this stool with your back to the door like me, you see. Then say 3 times, Devla, Devla Disako." Then the devil began to spin yarn and, believe it or not, yarn of gold came spinning off the spinning wheel. Then the girl too sat down on the little stool with her back to the door and repeated 3 times, Devla, Devla Disako. Then she set about spinning and, miracle of miracles, yarn of gold began to spin off the spinning wheel onto the spindle in her hand. "Well, my dear, I'll leave you now, but I'll be back when the year has passed. Do you understand our bargain?" I do, but before you go, please tell me your name." "I won't do that, but if you can guess, I won't take you away when the year's over." Then the girl carried on spinning until the candles had to be lit. And then her mother came home. "Goodness, my dear, is what I see true? Can you really make yarn of gold out of old string?" "Yes, I can, Mother. Hurry right away and tell the king the news." The king found it very hard to believe. "Well, your majesty, I swear upon my life it's true. Come and see for yourself." So the king set off to see for himself with 6 ministers, counts, barons, and generals. Not even the old oven had ever seen so many lords of the land gathered together before. It stood there gaping with its mouth so wide that it was unable to shut it ever again. Then the king and his lords all sat down and watched how the ugly girl spun yarn of gold out of string. The king was worried that he would have to wed such an ugly girl. But what else could he do? He sent a carriage drawn by 4 horses to fetch the girl, summoned a priest, and married her right away. The king slowly became accustomed to his new wife's looks, and soon he no longer saw her as ugly. They lived like this for quite some time, but as the days passed, the poor girl turned queen became sadder and sadder. What will become of me when the year is over? Both the king and the courtiers tried to cheer the queen up, but in vain. Then one day the king went out hunting with his men. He ordered his men to go right up to the top of the hill and set up camp under the largest tree. "We have a problem, Your Majesty. We can't set up camp under the largest tree because a small man shaped like a monster has made a fire there. Maybe we shouldn't go there at all." "On the contrary, we'll go and see who it is, even if it's the devil himself." And they reached the top of the hill, and there they saw a fire, and around the fire a tiny man dancing around a huge pot with an enormous wooden spoon. "Burn fire, burn flame, in this pot is what I make, a beautiful bride I will take, and Dan the dancer is no fake." As the king caught sight of him, he burst out laughing and went straight home to tell his wife so that she could have a good laugh too. And that's just what happened. The queen laughed so much that it seemed as though she had no worries in the world. Time went slowly by, and the year she had bargained would soon be reached at noon that day. On the strike of 12, just as the king and queen were about to eat a delicious bowl of soup, there was a knocking on the door. The queen could guess who it was. "Who is it?" "It's me, sweetheart, the one who taught you how to spin yarn of gold out of string. The year's up and I've come to take you away. If you can say who I am, you can stay." "You mean your name?" "It's Dan the Dancer. And to hell with you." Upon this, the little man burst with rage and slammed against the door, and all that was left of him was a big blob of tar. Then the king asked his wife how she knew who the man was. In her great fright, she told him all that had happened. "Well, my love, if you can still spin yarn of gold out of old string after this, you can stay. But if you can't, you must leave here and never return." So the woman sat down and said, "Devla, devla disako," and she began to spin. But it was no use. No yarn of gold would come off the spinning wheel. The woman had a fit, and in her rage, she flew against the door. There she turned into tar just like the devil. All the shoemakers and bootmakers went there from then on whenever they needed tar. And if I'm not mistaken, they go there still. Hungarian Folk Tales. The Slipper-Tearing Princesses. Once upon a time, there lived a king who had 3 daughters. Each of them wore and tore 12 pairs of slippers every single night. Finally, the king could not supply them any longer with footwear, so he issued a declaration across the land. He declared that anyone who could tell him where his daughters wore out their slippers every night would receive a very attractive payment as reward. The king had a young lad who worked as a shepherd. As he was grazing his flock of sheep one day, he suddenly decided to visit the royal palace. When he arrived, he told the king his reasons for coming. "Your Majesty, I shall find out where your daughters go every night." "All right, go ahead, and if you are successful, you'll get a rich reward." The king sent the shepherd boy to sleep in the same room where his daughters slept. The lad lay down on the floor with his bag and stick and pretended to be asleep. It was around midnight when he saw an old witch fly in through the window. She produced some kind of cream or ointment which the princesses rubbed on their knees and arms. As soon as they were done, they all hopped on a broom, took all their slippers and flew out of the window. The shepherd boy watched carefully, and finally he rubbed the ointment on himself and his stick. As soon as he was done, he whooshed right after the princesses, never letting them out of his sight. It wasn't long before the girls reached a silver forest, where they all settled down to rest. In the middle of the forest there was a silver well, with 3 silver goblets standing right next to it. The 3 princesses each had a sip of water. When they were finished, the shepherd boy collected their silver goblets and put them in his bag. He even broke off a silver twig from one of the trees. The twig rang out loud when he snapped it from the branch. The small princess was very frightened. "Why are you so scared, silly? Nobody can follow us here." So after a while, they all got on their broomsticks and flew off. They finally reached the middle of the golden forest. There was a well made of gold with 3 golden goblets standing right next to it. Each girl took a sip of water. The lad even broke a golden twig from one of the trees. The twig rang out loud when it snapped from the branch. The smallest prince was very frightened. "Don't be such a coward. There's nobody here. Who could it be anyway?" They flew off, but the shepherd was still following them. They soon arrived at the diamond forest, where there was a well made of diamonds with diamond goblets on the side. When the princesses all had their fill, the shepherd collected the goblets, broke a diamond twig, the twig rang out loud, and the smallest princess was very frightened. "Stop being scared all the time. There's nobody following us." They got on their brooms and continued their flight. Suddenly a huge gate opened up before them from somewhere below the ground. Inside there were 12 young he-devils waiting for them, and there was music playing from the attic. The shepherd boy quickly hid beneath the table, and he kept a close watch on everything. The he-devils and the girls started to dance. As the shepherd was watching a bit more closely, he noticed that the floor of the room was covered in razor blades. It was no wonder that the slippers of the princesses were worn and torn, since they were all dancing on the razor's edges. When one was torn to shreds, they just threw it away and put on a new one. When the 12 pairs of shoes were all danced to shreds, they sat down at the table. They all had a golden spoon and a fork to eat with. When one of them dropped her golden spoon, the shepherd boy quickly picked it up and put it into his bag. The other princess dropped her golden fork, and the shepherd boy picked it up and put it into his bag as well. When the girls were finally satisfied, they all hurried back home. But this time the shepherd boy flew faster because he wanted to get home first. By the time the princesses reached the royal palace, the shepherd boy was finally laying in front of their beds, pretending to be fast asleep. "He never even moved," the girls said. "Look, he's fast asleep." Morning came, and the shepherd went to see the king. The king asked him, "Well, son, have you seen anything? Have you found out anything?" "I have, your majesty. I have seen things, and I have found out things." At that point in time, the king summoned his 3 daughters, and the shepherd started to speak. First they went to a silver forest, And here is the evidence. He produced the silver goblets and the silver twig. Then they flew on to the golden forest, where they drank from their golden goblets. With that, he pulled the golden goblets and the golden twig from his bag. From there, they flew on to the diamond forest, where they drank another cup. Finally, they stopped in a palace where they danced with devils, and that's how they wore and tore all their slippers. In the meantime, they ate and drank too. One of them dropped her spoon, the other her fork. And here is the evidence, Your Majesty. Well done, son. The king ordered that the 2 elder daughters be locked up in the tower each night, gave his blessings to the youngest one, who married the shepherd boy. And that is how the slipper tearing came to an end.